Coogs House. They did it. Willie Fritz and the Houston Cougars are in the win column for the first time this year.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, here to celebrate a win with you after a big win in the Bayou Bucket by Willie Fritz and the Houston Cougars. Thank you for making us your, at this point, maybe last listen of the day. If you want to join the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below what you would drink out of the bucket to celebrate tonight as the Houston Cougars knock off the Rice Owls 33-7. We got a lot to get to today, a lot to talk about from that game. We'll talk about some of the things around the Big 12 as well. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time, and we got more on that later. I want to talk about first what went well and what happened in getting this bucket, because Houston had some explosive plays in this game that really struck me as unique and different from what we've seen, even really, honestly, anything close to thus far. Now, obviously, Rice is in a different league than Oklahoma, and if you're paying attention, they might be in a different league than UNLV as well, for UNLV knocked off Kansas on Friday night. But Houston had 4 touchdowns of over 35 yards in this game. And I think that really, when you look at that, that kind of helps explain like the different leagues these two teams looked like they were in all night long. Houston ground and pound run game, 42 carries, 237 yards. That's as dominant an effort as you could put together. Stacey Sneed the longest at 65 yards. He ended up having, the other 6 carries total of 16 or 17 yards, 7 carries for 82 yards, but 65-yard scamper. He went a split zone, bounced around the outside tackle, and took off down the sideline. Rashawn Sanford had the bulk of carries at 15 carries for 71 yards. A lot of workhorse kind of stuff there. Donovan Smith himself had 2 rushing touchdowns, including one of 37 yards, in which I don't think he was touched. Great blocking up front scheme involved in that one. Houston continued in this game to take what looked like to me chances and shots, right? And I know that's hard to talk about in the run game. They created angles and things like that where it's like, hey, if we can get past this, we're in the sideline and going for 40. Or we're going to get this at the in the line of scrimmage, and we'll be down right there where it's like a lot of effort to get guys into space. In the pass game, we saw a handful of screens, including a Boogie Johnson screen, which Shamar Hamdi-Lee decked somebody, get a 44-yard touchdown out of that. On the whole, right, it was interesting to watch this team go through explosive stuff in the ground game. And again, it really just kind of looked like Houston was in a different league than Rice, which is fascinating compared to how this game went a year ago, right, where the game went to double overtime and Houston failed a 2-point conversion and lost that game, right? Very, very different feel and vibes around the world today after this one. On the whole, you had the same kind of energy on the defense as well, flying to the football, 7, 8, 9 red shirts at every tackle. Lots of TFLs, guys getting hit in the backfield. Houston that came with, I think, a couple sacks, or the one might have been called roughing. I'm still trying to get things down. We'll talk about that in a second as well. Jalen Gardner had a sweet pick. They actually batted a screenplay up in the air, and he came down with it as well. Lots to go forward with in this one and to feel good about. Mekhi Muse has the big 75-yard touchdown punt return, right? Lots to feel good about there as well. I think it's interesting, like when we look back, and I was talking to Michael on Locked On Houston Sports about this. If Willie Fritz is the hire we think he is, right? You're looking back at this win 10, 15, 20 years from now, like, hey, that started the Willie Fritz era. Remember, they beat that bad Rice team to start the whole thing off. We don't necessarily know. We have our different projections about what could come next in this game, But on the whole, like this game could propel whatever that is, and it's interesting to see all of that move forward. I thought it was interesting in this game that defensively, Houston didn't do a whole lot of crazy stuff. They played very base kind of concepts, and were just dominant and successful with that. They didn't have to dial up a whole bunch of twists and stunts and blitzes because their dudes just beat dudes up front. I commented on Twitter one time that they were kind of playing with the alignment of Keith Cooper to kind of play with how he got singled or double blocked, because it kind of put a tackle on an island. And if the tackle is going to single block him, Keith Cooper is going to win. If they try to double team him, Carlos Allen was going to win. And we kind of saw this zigzagging back and forth between the two on the defensive front. Really, really interesting to see. Like, that's not a crazy concept or new thing, right? That's just something that Houston was doing throughout the game, finding success with. There are problems, and I don't mean to say that we won't talk about them in the second segment. If you see on the screen here while you're watching, there's lingering concerns, because I do have some of those. But on the whole, I think you leave this game feeling like you found an identity, and that is, for whatever you value it at, that Houston ran the split zone play on their 42 carries. I'd bet 28 times, and they ran split inside zone and split outside zone. So I guess there were variations on that. They ran left and they ran right with it. They went with running backs, they went with quarterbacks, they went all kinds of different positions on it. But I've been harping since Shannon Dawson freaking left, and I wasn't even a big Shannon Dawson fan. The offense needed to have something it could hang its hat on. Like, we do this thing well. We're going to do this thing so well that you have to stop this, and then everything we're going to do branches off of that, right? Last year with no offensive coordinator, they didn't have that, and they needed it desperately. This year, we went through 2 games trying to figure out what that thing was. Now, I know that Rice's defensive line is not that of a Utah or a Kansas State or somebody else later on our schedule in a tough conference game. But I do think it's worth pointing out that, like, it worked. And it's not that tonight we saw in a national landscape, this isn't a Big 12 story, so we're not going to touch on it later. Like, Georgia barely beat Kentucky, right? Like, these games can go close, right? And I think that we're seeing, right, more and more parity in college football because of some other outside variables and things like that. But you're also seeing, right, that when a team like Houston gets a game like this, where they get things right and they have a get right kind of game, you hope to build on that. Now we hope that going into next week in Cincinnati, we know, hey, we can run split zone against anything you line up in, right? You're going to have to do something that breaks a rule to stop the split zone, and then we'll take advantage of that from there. That's how an offense has direction. So an offensive coordinator does in building out their playbook and what they do. And I think that I feel comfortable saying after the Rice game that that's where the offense goes. Defensively, I think we got one of the best defenses in the Big 12. And I'm not just saying that because they, until the starters went out, were holding Rice to a shutout for 3.5 quarters or whatever it was. I'm not just saying that because of the Oklahoma game. I'm not just saying that because they held the go-go offense to 20 offensive points. I'm saying it because as I look at the way they're playing and getting better, right? They're getting quicker, right? They're making reads faster. They're collapsing on the ball with more red shirts throughout the ball and every tackle. They started off so strong and are just getting better. The telecast said it several times. The story of the 20 points, the offensive points, again, one of those touchdowns was defensive, of the 20 offensive points UNLV had was a bunch of missed tackles. We've now seen 2 weeks in a row where they've decisively fixed that, right? And so, I don't know if it's talking to Shea Wood or talking to Willie Fritz or whatever, but you can talk to someone to figure out what the difference is, and the light switch got flipped there, because that is dramatically improved and deserves all of the praise. Now, again, that deserves all the praise. There are a couple things that I'm bluntly still a little bit worried about. I want to talk about them in a second. But before we get too far, if Houston's going to build this into a championship caliber team, they're going to need passion, drive, and patience, just like you're going to need for winning championships with your ride or die. eBay Motors has everything you need to keep and maintain your vehicle and level up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. Always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because the eBay Motors are burning rubber and not cash. With all the parts you need, the price you want, is easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Get ride or die. ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Also, partner of the show today is LinkedIn Jobs, because when you're finding the right people for your small business, much like finding a roster or putting people in the right place in your roster, whatever, you make sure that you have the quality professionals that are right for that role. So you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs is the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those that aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. LinkedIn knows that small business owners are wearing so many different hats, they might not have time and resources to hire. LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They just launched a new feature that helps you write job descriptions, making them and the process even quicker and easier. Push job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. LinkedIn.com/lockedoncollege. Push job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, we will praise the Rice game in the next couple of days. Like, we will talk about it more on Monday and more about it on Tuesday, and probably move on at some point this week. But in the moment after the game, not just because the shutout got busted in the fourth quarter or whatever, I did have some concerns about this football team. And I am happy Willie Fritz got his first win. He's a guy that deserves it. I'm happy the kids got a first win of the season. I hope they get many more. But throughout the game, I will say there were aspects of the offense like, this offense should be putting up 40, 45, right? The simplest way to look at it, I guess, in one instance would be the fact that they missed a gimme field goal and an extra point. Both of those are not good. I thought we'd kind of figured things out with putting Joseph Kim in as a kicker last week, played great in Norman, and then he comes back to Houston and it's not so great. And I don't know what the deal there is and how you figure that out, how you know the hot foot is that week, but you need to figure that out. Another simple thing I thought was that Houston had multiple penalties still. We talked a lot about Houston and the Cougs not beating the Cougs, and you still had Houston with 5 penalties for 64 yards, including 2 of them being targeting penalties, leading to ejections. Right now, I talked with Michael of Locked On Houston Sports, and we mentioned that, like, the targeting penalty Latrell McCutcheon had in like 2014 would have been a highlight posted on every highlight reel all over America. It was a beautiful 2014 tackle. However, it's 2024, and he goes head to head on a punt, and you can't do that. And as phenomenal as the hit was from a contact perspective, and as phenomenal as the hit would have been in 2014, you can't do that anymore. Juwan Gaston saying that you can't do that anymore, right? Holding penalty, Jake Wiley, you can't do that. And at some point, right, we saw, if you're watching the telecast, if you were there in person, keep cheering them on. We need more folks like you. If you're watching the telecast, Jake Wiley gets called for unsportsmanlike conduct. I think after the play, it looked like a sack or something, and he like gets in the eyes, he jaws the defense after the fact. And if you could have, I mean, I'm not a professional lip reader, but Willie Fritz has some choice words and some strong emotions for Jake Wiley after that one. And Willie Fritz is not a guy that curses much. I don't mean to say that's what he was going, the road he was going down, but he was angry. And at some point that needs to start paying dividends and turning these penalties. 5 penalties for 64 yards isn't terrible, but against a stronger opponent, you don't want to give up. I mean, the goal is zilch, right? And so that, we're still at 5, and we've been preaching Cougs when we don't beat the Cougs for a long time. Need to see that get fixed. Okay, the elephant in the room here. The thing that needs to get fixed is the passing game is not great. And it's interesting because last week, you remember we went to Oklahoma and Donovan was 24-28 and not very many yards. And it was very clear that a lot of those yards were after the catch at that, right? The ball did not travel very far in the air. And my consistent criticism, right, was that, okay, at some point, though, you got to try and push. I get playing conservatively on the road, hostile environment, good team, trying to pull off the upset, and you almost did it. But to actually pull it off, at some point, you're going to have to push the ball. At some point, you're going to have to take that shot. At some point, you're going to have to take that chance. And then, maybe that's the reason they didn't is, they get to back to Houston and played Rice. And the past game was just, it was all over the place and erratic. Don Smith was 12 of 21 for 142 yards and a touchdown. And again, I thought there were things he did really well, and have to give credit where credit's due there. On the whole, though, right, like the receiver room is one of your most talented rooms, and you've got to find ways to get those guys the football, and it can't just be screens and checkdowns. It's got to be ways to get those guys the ball in open field, in space, on the move, right? Mekhi Muse had 3 catches for 22 yards, Long, which was 13. I don't recall one off the top of my head that was caught downfield, right? Boogie Johnson, I don't know that he's the fastest player on the team. There are times he certainly looks like it. 1 catch for a 44-yard screen, right? That is a thing that needs to be worked out. Malik Carr, a giant target, 2 catches, 1 was a screen pass. I like the screen pass call for what it's worth. 2 catches. Joseph Manjack, senior veteran leader, he would never complain about it. He had 2 catches for 16 yards. I think there's got to be some way to take advantage of what Donovan does well and also get the ball downfield some. And I tweeted out through the game, it looked almost like he's taken a step back a little bit as a passer, and I don't know if that's if that's healing off of the shoulder stuff still, if that's figuring out things still feel funny and different. I've never had that injury. It sounds really bad. And frankly, I can imagine for a quarterback and an athlete that everything is so routine and so memorized. I can imagine that's all really, really rough, right? But we really needed to propel this program forward, him to take a step forward this year. And maybe it's just that he's very much even and we needed that forward, but it feels like we're moving back. I thought he ran the ball a lot better. I thought that when given the opportunity, it looked like to make calls to the line, like they were doing things that ended up working. He certainly, I think a lot of people don't understand that part of all the checking he's doing and talking the line, but he's helping orchestrate the run game there. And I think that this is fairly the run game success. I don't think he should be tied. I don't think he should be not tied to, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It just the pass game, I think, to be a good team in the next couple of weeks is going to be important, and you got to be a little bit of balance. And 42 carries, 237 yards. I will, again, former high school run game coordinator, I will take that every time. Right, every time. There's just more meat on the bone still. There's athlete there that need the ball in space. People ask me on Twitter, I don't know what Parker Jenkins' thing was. I thought he twisted his ankle kind of funny in Oklahoma. He got out there, he had a couple carries for 6 yards. I thought the deal tonight was more about Rashawn Sanford, Jermaine Burnett, Stacey Snead. Those guys ran well. And frankly, when Stacey had a couple bad ones in a row, even though he had a 65-yard touchdown, when he had a couple bad ones in a row, they pulled him, right? Rashawn Sanford got 15 carries and was involved in he had a big block on the Donovan Smith 37-yard touchdown. And he's involved in the close plays of the game because he's playing well, right? And that's why people ask me, I don't know what happened, but I know this guy in the game is playing really well. And why would you take him out if you're the coach, right? I see comments here. I want to talk about comments. I'm talking about the Big 12, and I'm probably not done talking about this game, if being really honest. But before we get to that final second and tidbit, we do have to tell you guys to make sure you head over and check out Factor Meals, because it is time to start, dialing it back in. The summertime, people have barbecues and cookouts when it's fun, calorie-dense food. So again, get back in check a little bit. And Factor's no prep, no mess meal is a great way to do it. You can meet your wellness goals thanks to a menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and even Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Over 35 meals and up to 60 add-ons to choose from. Every week, you'll always find new flavors to explore. Make sure make your day delicious from breakfast to dessert. Stay fueled with easy and nutritious options. Enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences like managing calories, maximizing protein, avoiding meat, well balanced, whatever you're looking for. Factor's got it. Head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 and use code lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off your next month. That's code lockedoncollege50 at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box and 20% off the next month while your subscription is still active. All right, I was going to jump over and talk about the Big 12. We had a handful of comments here. A lot of go Cougs. Some people feeling good. People are feeling, again, they won the game 33-7. Lots of reasons to feel good. The Willie Fritz era has its first win. Robert, when I asked about what he would drink out of the bucket, said that he would drink beer. I could say get more specific, but we don't have a sponsor for that yet. Kenneth Cole says, congrats on win number 1 in the Willie Fritz era. Go Cougs. Agreed. And then Will Truman tags in me here at the end, says, good game. I thought we would win, but I don't expect us to dominate the way we did. I think we have a shot against Cincinnati. I do too, Will. Now, I will say, in looking at this, again, while I had my complaints, Houston did dominate the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball, and you will always have a chance with that. As I look across the conference, I want to start with next week's opponent, Cincinnati, who beat Miami of Ohio 27-16, also a rivalry game for them. Cincinnati's season's been kind of interesting. They played a rivalry this week against Miami of Ohio, kind of like Houston. They won, I don't want to say super handily. They won by 11, but I don't know what Miami of Ohio would be like compared to Rice. So we'll just say they both beat the rivals this week, right? Last week, they lost a close one at Pitt, a Power 4 opponent. Houston lost a close one at Oklahoma. I'd say Oklahoma's a little better, but also comparable. Game 1's the big difference. Cincinnati beat Towson. Houston lost to UNLV. That's kind of the big difference in their schedules thus far. And I weirdly feel like they're kind of at a comparable point. We're going to look at that game a lot this week. But Cincinnati has the first Big 12 win for Willie Fritz. Could be a big-time game and a big-time chance for that as well. But they beat Miami of Ohio tonight, 27-16. Across conference, Texas Tech finally got a good-looking win over North Texas. Kudos to them. They also barely beat Abilene Christian. West Virginia drops a second Power 4 rivalry game. They have this. They have those 2 Power 4 games every year because they have 2 rivals outside the conference. They lose to Pitt 34-38 in heartbreaking fashion. Feel bad for Paul on that one. Baylor beat Air Force, good for them. Colorado beat Colorado State, which I would say good for them, except that I guess they barely did that a year ago, so maybe they did get better. Game of the week, it looked like to me, was the Party Bowl. I mean, the game on Thursday night, Arizona State versus Texas State. Arizona State won 31-28 in a thriller. If you were not up on Thursday night watching that one was fun. Kansas State, Arizona was less fun. 31 points out of Kansas State's a lot of points against the Arizona defense. UCF TCU. I actually saw this one watching from my phone while the Houston game was on. TCU missed a field goal. It was like a 58-yarder or something. That was crazy. But Central Florida goes into TCU and wins in Fort Worth. That's pretty big time. Oklahoma State beat Tulsa. Utah beat Utah State. BYU is currently beating Wyoming. And that's apparently a rivalry game. I saw my man Jay Cash tweeting about that one. Didn't know all of that. On the whole, we left out one game because I think it's kind of important to Houston. I want to save it for last. On Friday night, UNLV went into Kansas. I guess it's not really a real home game, but went to Kansas and beat Kansas in the state of, I guess, Missouri, actually. But on the whole, I think that what people are saying is that 3-0 UNLV team is legit. They have another Power 4 opponent later this year. I think it's Syracuse, or kind of an ACC team. And then they have to play Boise State. There's kind of the two big competitive games for UNLV. And all that matters on that is if UNLV wins those games and wins that conference, they're probably going to have a real serious contending shot at the college football playoff. And I don't mean to say like, oh, I told you guys, because I'm not always that guy. But on the whole, I think that if UNLV is a playoff team, we contextualize these first 3 weeks in a whole different kind of way, right? Suddenly, they lost 27-7 to a playoff team. They lost 16-12 in Norman to a top 15 SEC team, and they came home and beat the brakes off of Rice. That's a whole different kind of 3 weeks than it is if UNLV is just some random group of 5 team. And I feel like the vibe, discussion, mood, Twitter, message board, whatever, after the UNLV game was way more like it was just some random group of 5 team and not like this is a team with a real shot at the playoff. They beat Kansas. Kansas was ranked to start the year. This is a team that really has a chance, and we'll keep following it more because of how it tells us about Houston later. But we'll keep following it. Trust me. We have a comment here coming in late about Carlos Allen. I thought the defensive line looked great, but Carlos Allen said that. Apollo Loxius. I'm saying things out. Carlos Allen showed some real quickness for a big guy on that QB sack. I thought he was even quicker on the one he got called for a penalty on. Actually, he hit. I don't think he hit him that late, but they called him for a roughing the passer. I think it was more about the violence and the timing of it on the Warner kid at quarterback for Rice. And I thought it looked quicker on that one, honestly, even than the sack. He looks good. He looks really good. And I got to be honest, I did not know that. I knew he was like someone that the staff was pretty high on. So I don't mean to say I didn't know anything, but I didn't know he was going to start, let alone be this impactful. I kind of thought Stillman would get a lot more reps. They're closer to 70-30 Carlos's way. And, he's a transfer kid from Kennesaw, and I think he might have been a little overlooked because of that. But 6'1", 295, making plays, moving like that. And I think he's got a great yin and yang with him and Keith Cooper, too. And Keith Cooper's playing the edge on his side. And it makes it pretty tough for whatever offensive players are trying to be over there. I want to break down this game more. We're going to watch it a second time on Sunday. Probably, if I'm being really honest, probably in that like afternoon NFL slot. There's some good NFL games tomorrow, but I'm going to try and watch on this one. If I can find a condensed copy, that'd be great. So if you got one of those, drop it to me on YouTube. The YouTube will do that sometimes. And then we'll talk more about breaking this down a little bit more analytically on Monday, Tuesday. I'm trying to get someone in I got a couple of people I'm talking to talk about Isaiah Harwell and the big basketball signing or commitment from last week, and kind of what that could mean for the program. We got Cincinnati to get ready for, though. And so we got to make sure we start doing our film studies and getting into all of that, and looking forward to all things Cincinnati, the road to Cincinnati, or whatever we want to call it. Locked On Coogs is going to be here each and every day. Thanks for bringing us your last listen of the day or first listen after the game or whatever the case may be. We appreciate you. Locked On Coogs is a primary Locked On podcast network. That means your team every day. Go Coogs.